Watch right now on the Front News Project. Pokrovsk, exclusive footage of real battles. The Ukrainian armed forces are meeting the enemy harshly. You have to see this. Moscow is facing a blackout. Ukrainian missiles and drones are ready to strike military targets in the Russian capital. Crimea. Powerful arrivals. An oil depot in Simferopol is on fire, and this is just the beginning. Fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front line. Watch right now. Hello, this is Vladimir Timoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic. Ukrainian Pokrovsk. This city in the Donetsk region remains at the center of attention. The enemy has concentrated units from 3 different armies in the direction of Pokrovsk, advancing simultaneously from the north, south, and west. Thanks to a large number of personnel, the enemy managed to penetrate Pokrovsk and amass forces for further actions in the city and to disorient our forward positions by operating from the rear and the flanks. For more details on what is happening in the city right now, here is a report by TSN correspondent Yulia Kirienko.
These are drone pilots from the 25th Airborne trying to get out of Pokrovsk, where their positions were located. They are evacuating the wounded because they had to engage in small arms combat right in the residential neighborhoods of the city. Surprisingly, the occupiers advanced there very quickly. They are being spotted by the hundreds, and they are already taking up positions and mining the area. But most importantly, they are trying to block our infantry, which is still on the southern flanks, far from the city. Our forces are gathering reinforcements in the Pokrovsk direction. There are reports that the GUR is airlifting its special forces in by helicopter. The General Staff is bringing in assault units and SSO combat groups. All of this is to clear the residential neighborhoods of the occupiers. They are already strolling leisurely through the streets of Pokrovsk. As our reconnaissance drone recorded, they are driving civilians out of their homes, those who still remain among the city ruins. Enemy groups began infiltrating Pokrovsk through Zverovo, a village in the southwestern part of Pokrovsk. Then they moved on to Grishino to cut off the road from Pavlograd to Pokrovsk. It was there that the Russian tricolor was hung last week. However, within an hour, our FPV drones had already shot it down, but the enemy infantry remained in the city. Groups of Russians were spotted near the railway and in the central districts. The city is gradually turning into a gray zone, and the Russians have increased pressure on it and neighboring Mirnograd from 3 sides. Russia has pulled together a force of as many as 11,000 occupiers to push our troops out of the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration. This is according to the 7th Corps, which is holding the defense there. And Putin has already claimed that both cities are blocked. But that's not true. Enemy infantry are being hunted down and destroyed, and it's anything but easy for them to advance.
In general, this is more like the movement of groups trying to gather at a distant point for further movement or crossing. The enemy may deploy small groups on motorcycles. Also, 2 days ago, there was an incident where 2 motorcycles with personnel were destroyed. Today, there have also been cases of motorcycle equipment being destroyed.
Russia is not acting in Pokrovsk in the same way as when our troops were once pushed out of the Kursk region. First, they filled the entire sky above our defenders with drones. So the infantry had to move into position for several days in a row, covering dozens of kilometers on foot with provisions and ammunition.
3 days, sometimes even more. They are forced to hole up somewhere and wait until the enemy shifts their attention away from them. If we're talking about Pokrovsk right now, groups are currently entering there on foot, and from there they move around the city.
Then they started putting pressure on the infantry from the flanks. Their task, according to the defense forces, is to reach the road that connects Pokrovsk and Mirnograd and block it, which would finally cut off the last lines of communication with our infantry, which still exists. At the moment, the General Staff states that our troops, despite the fighting in the city, are not encircled. This is indeed the case, as confirmed by open-source intelligence analysts. However, the infantry that has been stationed on the outskirts of Pokrovsk, in the Lisovka and Novopavlovka areas for more than a year and a half, is in a very difficult situation.
And here is another extremely important topic. Moscow residents need to prepare to survive in conditions of a lack of heat and electricity. This is evidenced by the systematic and precise strikes by Ukrainian defenders on the energy infrastructure and other military targets in the Russian capital. So what will happen next in the Whitestone city and the region? You'll find out now.
Ukrainian drones are striking the Russian power grid more frequently and on a larger scale. On the night of October 5th, Ukrainian UAVs attacked energy infrastructure in the Vladimir and Oryol regions. In Vladimir, the strike hit a 750 kilowatt substation in the suburbs. Local residents claimed that the city was attacked by missiles, not UAVs. In Oryol, explosions thundered in the area of the local CHP plant, the largest source of electricity and heat in the region. The attack was most likely a missile strike, since the video contains neither the sounds of air defense nor the buzzing of drones. Here,
that was the bang.
this is already the second attack on the Oryol CHP plant in the past week. On October 31st, it was hit by Neptune cruise missiles. At that time, the city was left without power. Also on the last day of October, the Vladimir CHP plant was on fire.
Moreover, this substation supplies electricity to the central region, including Moscow, Vladimir, Nizhny Novgorod, and partly Ivanovo regions. In general, it also participates in power transmission, from the Kalinin nuclear power plant to the Kostroma GRES and other major energy sources.
The stable operation of the Vladimir substation is critically important for the reliability of the Russian power system's balance. It is of particular significance. Energy from the Kalinin NPP is supplied through it. This makes the substation one of the key facilities for the Moscow energy hub. The SU wants to cause a blackout in the Whitestone city, striking substations around Moscow.
In recent weeks, attacks on important energy hubs have been recorded. Arzamatskaya 500 kilovolts on October 14th, Balashovskaya 500 kilovolts on October 16th and 25th, Vladimirskaya 750 kilovolts on October 17th and 31st, and November 5th, Vishkaima 500 kilovolts on October 18th, Novobryanskaya 750 kilovolts on October 29th, Lipetskaya 500 kilovolts on November 2nd, Frolovskaya 500 kilovolts on November 3rd. According to industry analysts, the goal of the strikes is to deprive Moscow of the ability to receive maneuverable electricity from the Volga hydroelectric power stations.
Before these strikes on substations, the head of Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Brody, warned that Muscovites should start preparing for blackouts.
A blackout is nothing to be afraid of. The SBS birds, together with other components of Ukraine's deep strike capabilities, promise you a rapid, albeit forced, adaptation. But you'll manage. Matches, flashlights, candles. By the way, take this opportunity to use your favorite battery-powered garlands too. We won't be informing you about every 750 kilowatt, 500 kilowatt and so on installation damaged by the birds. Just go by the principle: light, warmth, boom, darkness, cold. And your open source intelligence in public channels is still working flawlessly, as long as there's internet. The strikes were announced and the strikes happened. And the enemy, even knowing which infrastructure would be targeted, was unable to organize an effective defense. There were announcements that blackouts were expected, and only after that did the drones take off. And
Only after that did the drones take off.
If such strikes continue, in the short term, Moscow will be left without electricity. Plus, strikes on gas storage facilities and gas distribution stations. Then the capital of the Russian Federation will be left not only without electricity, but also without heat.
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Lyman front. The enemy army is acting true to form here as well. On the Lyman front, the occupying forces carried out 6 attacks on the positions of Ukrainian units near the settlements of Novoye Horivka, Hrekivka, and Zareknaya, Novoselivka, and towards the settlement of Korovy Yar. 4 combat clashes are ongoing. The number of wounded in Mykolaiivka, Dnipropetrovsk region has risen to 9. The occupiers struck the village almost simultaneously with a missile and a Shahed drone. A store on the main street was destroyed. At the time of the attack, there were many people there. One of the customers died at the scene. The owner, who was at the epicenter of the strike, and a 5-year-old girl are in serious condition in the hospital. Our correspondent from KTSN, Anastasia Naverna, will tell you more about the cynical attack by the treacherous enemy.
These are ruins that have been smoldering for the second day now. Here, a house and a family business, a store, are still burning. A distraught Lyudmila walks through the ruins of her daughter's house, trying to find anything that survived. She admits it's not for the sake of the belongings, but to distract herself from terrifying thoughts.
My daughter's leg was amputated and her arm was cut off. She's 37 years old with 2 children, and they took her to Dnipro. She screams, "Mom, don't cry, we'll still dance together."
Lyudmila says her daughter survived thanks to her son-in-law. He gave her first aid and protected her during the second attack, which also caused a lot of damage.
Her husband did a great job. He immediately bandaged everything for her, then fell on top of her and shielded her with his own body. The girl worked at the shawarma place. She also had her fingers cut off. In short, her leg, even her cap on her head melted.
Family, friends, and acquaintances are helping. They are clearing the rubble and taking away the remaining goods and equipment. Nearby, almost completely burned out trucks that were also at the epicenter of the strike. The house across from the site of the attack stands without windows and with a damaged roof. Miraculously, Dmitri's wife and 2 children survived inside. Because the man says everything happened instantly, there was no time to hide.
They didn't understand anything. They were buried here. Here, my son was sitting in the armchair, and by that window, my daughter was sitting. Their mother was lying on the couch here. They didn't even have time to be scared.
Everyone got away with minor injuries, Dmitri says, and a terrible fright. They don't even want to think about coming back.
My wife has some injuries. Her head was cut a little, not badly, but also her arm and leg. My son hurt his arm. My daughter apparently has a concussion. We took them to the hospital. There's no electricity in the hospital. They're taking us back somewhere. I don't know. We'll have to go somewhere else.
Neighbor Dmitri Ivan also nearly died. When he came to after the first explosion, he ran outside to see if anyone needed help.
I came out, just got here, and the cars were burning right over there. I stood here looking like this when I heard a drone coming from behind, a Shahed. I crouched down and crossed myself thinking, dear God, let it go somewhere else, but it flew right over me about 15 to 20 meters above and straight into the cars. It flew about 15 to 20 meters above me.
And straight into the cars.
Realizing that he had survived for the second time, despite the danger, he rushed to save the victims.
People were screaming and I ran. We pulled out 3 people, but those who were screaming, they were screaming because they were wounded.
In this shelling, the Russians killed a woman and wounded her 5-year-old granddaughter with whom she was going to the store to buy a cheburek. The child had to have her leg amputated as a result of the attack in the village. 9 people were injured, and the residents of more than 30 destroyed houses were left without a roof over their heads.
And now we move to the Alexandrovsk direction of the front. The so-called Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. In the Alexandrovsk direction, the enemy is trying to break through the defenses of our troops near the settlements of Sekhnovo, Verbovo, and Pervomaiskaya. Our soldiers repelled 3 enemy assaults. Another attack is still ongoing. Meanwhile, there are explosions in Crimea. After a drone strike, an oil depot in Simferopol caught fire. Also, in the area of the former Donetsk airport, a storage, assembly, and launch base for Shaheds was hit by fire. And overall successful attacks in the successful strikes by the armed forces on Russian military targets in Crimea and Donbass indicate preparations for the deoccupation of these Ukrainian regions. The evidence is in our next report.
A unique operation that lasted for months ended with a spectacular explosion in the middle of Donetsk. According to locals, nothing like this has ever been seen before in the occupied territories. Where did the strike hit? What was destroyed? And most importantly, what did the Ukrainian armed forces use to carry out the attack?
Judging by the special effects and the massive explosions, Flamingo missiles were used.
So, let's go through everything step by step. Last night, a powerful explosion rocked Donetsk, after which, according to eyewitness videos, a fireball resembling a nuclear mushroom cloud rose into the sky and windows were blown out in buildings several kilometers from the epicenter.
The windows were blown out.
In reality, this is the Oktyabrski airport area. A large ammunition depot. Missiles hit there. There's no official information yet, but people are already talking about an ammo depot. I watched the video. It's spectacular. Most likely it really was a very large missile or shell depot, because in the video, the explosion looks like something out of a sci-fi movie or a computer game. And then there was a second explosion, just like that. You can see this glowing, rapidly expanding wave. So, the strike on the Donetsk depots was very successful.
A bit later, the head of the UAV systems of the Ukrainian armed forces, Robert Magyar-Brudi, provided some clarity on the matter. According to his information, the strike hit a large warehouse of Shahed-type drones where warheads were also stored.
The targeting of this complex objective turned into a painstaking intelligence operation that lasted several months, pieced together from small fragments. Last night, it was carried out using appropriate strike assets by the Special Operations Forces and the missile troops of the Ukrainian Defense Forces.
Analysts note that despite the Shahed's flight range, it was extremely important for the Russians to keep the warehouse of these drones close to the front line. After all,
every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
When the occupiers launch UAVs just a few dozen kilometers from the line of contact, the Ukrainian armed forces simply do not have time to respond quickly. As a result, the drones carry out their terror in frontline cities. They also strike at the forward positions of our troops.
Disrupting the logistics of supplying shells and missiles for drones to the Pokrovsk direction, to Pokrovsk itself, that is very important for us right now. This is very important for us at the moment.
However, our command chose not to disclose what exactly the defense forces used in the strike. One thing is certain, drones definitely took part in the attack, but something else followed them as well.
As footage from the scene shows, it was clearly not just drones at work. The UAVs, as can be understood, were distracting the local air defense. But the decisive strike was delivered by something resembling a rocket. It may have been a drone or possibly a missile.
Reports from Magyar about the participation of Ukraine's missile forces in the attack also indicate that missiles were indeed used.
I don't think the Shahed warehouse was unprotected, that it was just some hangars. Most likely, we're talking about some kind of underground bunker. And that's another reason why I think it was Flamingo. Of course, Storm Shadow could have been used as well. Storm Shadow would have been suitable here too. They have a bunker busting capability. Nevertheless, the scale of the detonation shows that, at least that's how it seems to me, if you look at the first second, the explosion was clearly much bigger than just a couple 100 kilograms of Storm Shadow warhead.
So yes, most likely it really was our Ukrainian Flamingos. By the way, this is already the third time just this week that they've inflicted colossal damage on the Russians. But in Crimea, such power wasn't needed, so drones were sent to attack the peninsula. In occupied Simferopol, around 2:30 in the morning, a fire broke out at an oil depot. Presumably, this refers to Crimea pit in the area of the village of Bitumnoye. There were also reports of 4 strikes in Gvardeyskoye, after which smoke rose into the sky. There, the hits likely struck the local thermal power plant, which temporarily ceased operations.
Well then, now let's analyze the operational situation on the Konstantinovka front. The situation here is extremely tense. On the Konstantinovka front, the aggressor carried out 9 assault actions in the areas of the settlements of Alexandra Shultino, Sherbinovka, Rusinyar, and towards Sofiivka. 3 combat clashes are still ongoing. Russia and the United States are exchanging nuclear threats and are already practically taking actions, which, God forbid, could lead to escalation. The United States is deploying missiles in Europe that can reach Moscow in a matter of minutes, while Russia is testing its latest nuclear weapons. How far can this go? And what consequences does this threaten for the entire civilized world? Let's figure it out together.
The doomsday clock is approaching midnight. After Putin refused to accept Trump's terms for ending the war in Ukraine, Russia and the US began brandishing their nuclear clubs. Both the White House and the Kremlin started considering conducting nuclear tests.
All this nuclear hysteria is directly connected to the Trump administration's efforts to end the war in Ukraine. The Russian Federation is trying to use this topic Possible nuclear tests are being considered as the last argument of kings in the implementation of their own plans to end the war. During
the meeting between Putin and the Russian Security Council, Defense Minister Andrei Belousov suggested to the dictator to prepare for full-scale nuclear tests, calling it a response to the actions of the United States.
At the end of this year, the United States plans to adopt the new Dark Eagle medium-range missile system equipped with hypersonic missiles with a range of 5,500 kilometers. Furthermore, there are plans to deploy this system in Europe and the Asia-Pacific region. The flight time of such a missile from the territory of Germany, where this missile system is planned to be stationed, to targets in the central part of Russia will be about 6 to 7 minutes. In
reality, it was Putin and his servants who first set the wheel of nuclear escalation in motion.
The creation of the Burevestnik made it possible to conduct tests of the Poseidon. There is truly no equal to this weapon. The President, from start to finish, personally oversaw the implementation of this project. We are seeing the results of the country's increased defense capability, and today, those abroad who wish us harm should be preparing to go, hat in hand, to our Supreme Commander-in-Chief, just to beg that this weapon not be used against them.
The statement by the US President about possible nuclear tests, as well as the launch of the Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile, were responses to the threats posed by the Burevestnik and Poseidon.
Russia is conducting tests, China is conducting tests, but they don't talk about it. You know, we are an open society, we are different. We have to talk about it, otherwise you'll write about it yourselves. They don't have journalists who would write about it. We will conduct tests.
Nuclear tests are a serious step. Officially, the superpowers have not conducted them for more than 30 years. Moscow last tested its nuclear weapons in 1990, the US in 1992. The key document regarding mutual deterrence between the two nuclear superpowers is the bilateral treaty between Russia and the US, New START, on mutual reduction and monitoring of nuclear arsenals. The document is valid until February 2026, but in 2023, the occupying country unilaterally suspended the treaty. Currently, in nuclear matters, the greatest influence on the Russian Federation comes from China.
Beijing has not yet had its final say. And let me remind you, it was the official reaction from Beijing that once put an end to the Russian Federation's attempts to destabilize the situation on the international stage. At the moment when there was a possibility of using tactical nuclear weapons on the territory of Ukraine,
it is no coincidence that after meeting with Xi Jinping in South Korea, Donald Trump announced work on a denuclearization plan involving the US, Russia, and China. According to experts, if Moscow does not abandon its nuclear rhetoric in the near future, in addition to the Americans, the Chinese will also begin to put pressure on the Russian authorities.
in addition to the corresponding military pressure from the United States on the Russian Federation and targeted responses, one should also expect corresponding diplomatic efforts from official Beijing.
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Sloviansk front. The enemy insists here as well. On the Sloviansk front, the defense forces repelled 8 attacks. The invading units tried to advance near Yampol, Dronivka, Siversk, Serebryanka, and Fedorivka. 3 more combat clashes are ongoing. Ukrainian engineers have created an analog of the Chinese Mavics, which are in high demand at the front. And this is just one of the new products from the domestic defense industry, which is producing them at lightning speed. We will tell you about the latest and most effective developments by Ukrainian military engineers. Let's watch. Reconnaissance, fire adjustment, and striking targets by dropping munitions. The Chinese Mavic drone is almost the main weapon of the Ukrainian armed forces in the war against the occupier. And now, Ukrainian industry has begun supplying Mavic-type UAVs of domestic production to the front lines.
A certain Mr. X invested, created the Ukrainian Mavic, and we will see it soon. We have already delivered the first 1,000 to the battlefield.
Compared to the Chinese Mavic, the Ukrainian counterpart has a greater flight range and can carry a larger payload. It is used not only for reconnaissance, but also for strike missions. The importance of the emergence of Ukrainian drones in this niche is hard to overestimate, since there are huge problems with the supply of Mavics to Ukraine.
DJI has banned sales to Ukraine, piously declaring that its products are not intended for military purposes, so drones have to be purchased from third parties. The security issues are obvious. The Pentagon has banned any use of DJI drones which send data back to the manufacturer. DJI has also added security features that make it impossible for the latest models to fly in geo-blocked zones, including Ukraine, without extensive hacking. Finally, sovereign drone production is seen as a key strategic capability for the future.
The Chinese drone Mavic's counterpart is called Shmavik, and despite the ironic name, it has already been certified and boasts some serious features.
Shmavik is positioned as a tactical reconnaissance UAV designed to carry out operational tasks on the front line, unlike the civilian Mavic, which is mainly used for aerial photography and videography. Shmavik is designed for combat conditions. It has a range of up to 15 kilometers, a flight duration of up to 60 minutes, and is equipped with a reliable navigation system that is resistant to interference.
As early as last year, the government announced its interest in replacing Chinese drones. Now, manufacturers have already certified Ukrainian Mavics and set up production.
As of today, it is impossible to completely replace the entire fleet of foreign drones currently being used in Ukraine in the short term. Our weapons manufacturers already have developments and designs that meet the needs of our security and defense forces. Now it is necessary to scale up this production and minimize the number of foreign counterparts as much as possible, and switch to domestic models.
There are already many Ukrainian analogs of the Mavic, including Ukreporter, Yaitia, and the charming Shmavik. They are larger than DJI Mavic drones, equipped with long-range communication, interference resistance, and are more expensive. But they may turn out to be more economical thanks to their greater reliability.
For us, the key indicator is not the price per drone, but the cost of a single mission. While a typical Mavic performs about 60 missions per drone, our systems on average complete around 300 missions per unit. With a comparable purchase price, the cost of a single mission is 5 times lower, which means that military units operating our drones receive a much greater overall economic benefit. Drone manufacturer.
Independent UAV production is a crucial element of modern warfare, and Ukraine knows this better than anyone because short-range UAVs and long-range strike drones have become the most important elements of national defense.
That's all for today. But very soon on Front News, you'll see new, unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.